just done that way just because we've always done it that way. That could be true too. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that as long as you've got the right presuppositions to start with. But I don't think it's all just made up, and I think there are reasons. We should have reasons for what we do. We should have reasons for what we do. And we need to examine those reasons from time to time to see if there's a better way or if we're on the right track. And I'm not going to defend what Churches of Christ do just because it has a name on the sign that says Church of Christ. I'm not going to defend that. I have no obligation whatsoever to defend that as a preacher, nor should you. We should defend what the Scriptures say. And if the church needs to alter what it's doing, then so be it. And so anyway, that's why I made this list it was involved in a bunch of big discussions about tradition and the difference between tradition and expediencies and all of that. And so that all came about, and that's what this list is. The list is not exhaustive. It's not even particularly well organized. I tried to organize it. I'm just not patient enough to organize this the way I should. I'm going to try to redo it. This is many years old. And a lot of things that have come up in recent years aren't even on here. Like whether it's right to give digitally instead of putting cash in a basket. It may have something like that, but I don't think some of that kind of stuff is on there. Nothing about live streaming or worshiping remotely. None of that stuff's on here. Maybe it should be, but it's not to discuss. But let's go down here to my goodness, my nose is itching for some reason today. Number 43 on the list, use of instrumental music as such. People will say, do you have music in your church? And I'll say, yes. And what do you think? But I know that when they say that to me, I know when I say yes, that they think I'm lying to them. Because why would they say that? What do they mean when they say, do you have music in your church? Do you have instrumental music in your? When I say yes, we have music, what do I mean? Well, yes, we have music. We have vocal music. People think that music is one thing and vocal is another. That's a modern conception of the idea, but that one has an exclusive. That they're not exclusive. I was having some fun discussion with somebody the other day about we were in some place called a cafe, and I said, well, this is not a restaurant. This is a cafe. And the other day I went to a diner. That's not a restaurant. It's a diner. It's not a restaurant, and it's not a cafe. Well, is a cafe a diner? Maybe. Is a cafe a restaurant? Yes. Is a diner a restaurant? Yes. But a cafe is not a diner, necessarily. This is the nuance of English words that we use. We use them as native speakers of English, or for people familiar, the nuance of different words, and yet a translator might put in the word restaurant, and it might say diner in it to someone who reads. The word might mean diner to someone who really understands that language, but a translator would just say restaurant, because then the person who's in another culture would understand what that was. Well, sometimes you get the same thing with things like music. What does the Bible say about music that we direct toward God? Now, none of this, listen, everything that we're going to say about this subject has nothing to do with whether it's right or wrong to play an instrument or to listen to music on an instrument. Nothing wrong with any of that. But the question is not that you have something against instrumental music. No. You don't believe in instrumental music. No. I'm saying that I don't believe that it should be directed in the church as worship to God. I can narrow the subject down there. Might be broader than that, but we'll start there. Now, how would I go about deciding that question? That's really the important thing that I want you to get out of this whole class. How would I go about deciding the question of what kind of music or whether there should be music in a church service? Should there be music in a church service? If so, what kind? How would I go about deciding that? Well, you could say, well, Because it's always been done that way. I'm a member of this denomination, and they've always had that music, so we have that music. Do you think most members of the Baptist Church have thought through why they used instrumental music as far as the scriptures are concerned? No, they haven't thought through that. They've been told, well, David used instrumental music. Or that's all they've been told. They don't know, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean that's the extent of their curiosity about the subject or the depth of it. They do not know. Do you think most members of the Churches of Christ know why we don't use instrumental music? I'm going to say they don't. Except that our tradition, our religion, our tradition doesn't use them, and so that's good enough. Most people do not know. Am I unfair in saying that? My experience says I'm not unfair. I might be, but I don't mean to be unfair in saying that. They don't know. Except that we don't. Now then, young people grow up and they say, well, why not? I've been to this friend, went to church with this friend over here, and they got a nice band over there, man. I was at a church service the other day here in Port St. Lucie. I had a chance to go on to some event for, I guess us important pastors got invited to this event. Church United, it was called, over at the Christ Fellowship Church out in, is that Palm City or Tradition, wherever that is? Tradition? I can't remember. It's out there, big place. It's like and they got a Starbucks in there. They got bigger than a Starbucks in there. And literally just like a Starbucks. You're laughing, Eloise. I got pictures of it. You won't believe.
I've been there.
It's a Starbucks, yes. And so, and I'm just saying it was, different. So you go in, they say, well, before we have our little talk about churches being united, which I knew that was going to be fun, we're going to have a worship service. So they bring out the band. They have a band, and there's a young woman leading the worship service. Another clue. She comes out. She got her guitarists and bass players and I don't know what all they have. Huh? Backup singers, yes. And she's got her, and so she leads the worship service for about 30 minutes or so. And within a few minutes, the bass was the music was so loud I could feel it in my chest. Literally, I could feel the music, the beat of the music in my body, in my chest. Well, they were, but they were. Listen. This sounds like I'm being sarcastic. I can't help it. I just am sarcastic. I can't help it. But I don't mean it that way. It's a family trait. It's genetic. Huh?
One of your finer traits.
One of my finer traits. I have this sarcastic resting face, apparently, I find. I think I'm a pretty nice person, but apparently people don't think I am. Anyway, I don't know why that on some songs and some parts they raise the left hand. Sometimes they raise the right hand. Sometimes they raise both hands. And I don't know why. They all seem to know why, and I didn't know why. Now that's a clue, and I'm not making fun of it, because that's a clue that when people come into this service, sometimes they don't know why we do what we do, because we don't say. And it may be strange to them. So maybe we ought to think about that. But the point being, did anybody question whether this was right or wrong or should be done? No one does. But I think it behooves us, as people who want to follow the Scriptures, we say we're a Bible-based church. We should follow what the Scriptures say. What does the Bible say about this? All right, let's go take a look at some Scriptures. I don't want to we can have a long discussion of this, and I don't really want to. I want to give you a couple of basic things to think about. Where would we start? How would you start to think about this issue? What would be the first thing that you think you might do in a broad way? To go to the Scriptures, and what would you be looking for? What are some things you would be looking for? Huh? You'd be looking for verses that have to do with singing, or with what? Music. You'd look for passionate about music. and singing and worship, connecting those together, because there's some things about music that are not connected to a worship service. So you have to distinguish eventually those things.
Explain about the difference between the old law and the new law.
You'd have to look at the context of where those scriptures, where they fall, and you always have to generally look there, where the script, what the books are about, what scripture, where do they fall. You'd begin to look at the whole thing. That's how you would decide, not looking and say, well, what did they do in 1800, or what did they do in 400 AD? You wouldn't look there. Yes, ma'am.
And you can't add to the Bible. Like I listened to you and Gary on the video this morning, how that lady kept adding and putting her own thoughts in the Bible. And I don't think we should be able to do that.
They should not add to the Bible? Yes. Well, when they start talking about the Immaculate Conception of Mary, they're adding to the Bible a doctrine, right? That's what was on the radio this morning. Is that what you're talking about, Janie?
Yeah, lady at the top.
Yeah. Yeah. She took about 3 different positions while we were talking, but the Immaculate Conception of Mary is a religious doctrine, but it's not in the Bible as such. The reasons why it exists are in the Bible, but that doctrine is not in the Bible. And it's very difficult. There are other Catholic doctrines, for example, that you would find scriptures about in the Bible, or at least some reference to them, but Immaculate Conception is not one of those.
That's in the Bible, right?
Well, I believe Mary, I do believe, as I said in the radio this morning, that is one Catholic doctrine I do believe in. I do believe in the Immaculate Conception of Mary. I believe that Mary was conceived without sin. Do you? I believe so was her parents, and so were their parents, and so were their parents, all the way back to Adam and Eve. I believe they were all conceived without sin. So I do believe in the Immaculate Conception of Mary, just not the way they mean it. Because they believe she was conceived without sin, but her parents weren't, you see. So God gave her an Immaculate Conception. What's wrong? Why do they believe that? Now we're getting way off track, Benjamin.
You said her parents, and then
Well, they believe that if Mary had sin, then Jesus must have had sin, because sin is passed from, the original sin passes from parent to child. And so somehow they came up with the idea, well, we'll just make Mary immaculate. Didn't solve the problem. They say that her parents, who are not in the Bible at all, Anna and Joachim, that they were both unable to bear children, and so that she was conceived without sexual intercourse. That's what they actually believe about Mary, that Mary was conceived without sexual intercourse, because sexual intercourse is sin. At least in some Catholics it is. It's not a good thing anyway, which the Bible is completely teaches that's not true. But this is where this kind, and I don't know that the original people who made up that doctrine originally thought that, but this is how it comes down to modern people, is that sexual intercourse is bad. You should only have it if necessary to have children, and therefore Mary's parents did not have sexual intercourse, but she had a child because they prayed to God. That's essentially what many... This doctrine did not come into being until 1854. It was not officially approved until 1854, this doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. Now, it's the second newest of the big doctrines. The newest one is in 1950, which is the bodily assumption of Mary. That she never died and was corrupted. She was bodily assumed to heaven, just like Jesus was. So they eventually make Mary just like Jesus, conceived as a virgin and assumed into heaven without decaying. That's what the Catholics have done with Mary over the centuries. But those two latest ones are new, 1854 and 1950. And yet, if you read about it, they will say these are the eternal doctrines of the church, taught from the beginning. And yet, we know that that's not true. It baffles my mind. It does sometimes. It baffles my mind. So anyway, now, I understand there's a logical reason for those doctrines. And that's a problem with what we're talking about here. We end up doing things a certain way, and we have logical reasons for that based upon what we believe over here. We begin to make deductions, and we come up with this one over here. Now, you can do that if it's a necessary inference, or at least you have to be cautious or careful about that, aware of that. But when you just ignore it, you don't, huh?
It's called cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, when you believe two opposite things at the same time, then that's cognitive dissonance. You don't really, your brain won't let you connect up that you're believing two opposite things, or two contradictory things, not opposite, two contradictory things at the same time. But in any event, we have to understand that we do make logical deductions, and sometimes they're valid, sometimes they're not valid. And be aware of those things. So let's go look at some scriptures here. I don't think I have anything up there, do I? Here's one in the New Testament. We're going to get somewhere. This is one you're familiar with probably. Speaking to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing adantes. Do you see the ADO and the word in brackets, the ADO part, ado? That's the word for sing, one of the words for sing in Greek, and we get the word ode, as I mentioned before, like ode to Billy Joe. Ode to my family, maybe some of you are more familiar with the Cranberries. Ode to my family. That's ode, that's a song. And adantes is to sing. And then making melody, solantes. You can see the word solo there, or psalm. That's the Hebrew word psalm brought over into Greek, and it means to make melody. It really means to strum and to make music. Originally, it meant to strum your beard, pluck your beard. So when I sit here and do this, I am in the original way back in Greek, I'm soloing my beard. It just means to pluck. Then it came to mean to pluck on an instrument. And in the New Testament, it comes to mean, then it came to mean the Greeks to pluck figuratively something, to stir up someone's heart, to stir up their heart, these kind of things, has a figurative usage. So by the time you get to the New Testament, most grammarians would say it has more this figurative usage of making a melody in your heart to the Lord. Ephesians 5:19. Then you have Colossians 3:16, a similar passage, parallel with each other. They're not exact, but they're parallel. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing, there's the word again, adantes, with grace in your hearts to the Lord. So that's what Paul says. So here's the three things again, psalms, hymns, spiritual psalms, hymns, spiritual songs. Those are the three things we should be singing. Now we can talk about what those are. They're almost the same, but there are distinctions in those things. Psalms, hymns, spiritual songs. And that they do it together. One another. Whatever this is, Christians are doing it together, to one another, not each individual. Yes?
How about singing spiritual songs outside the assembly to instrumental music?
Okay, that's another question, whether you can individually do this outside the assembly. And there's other factors involved in that, which we can talk about a little bit later. But this is talking about, I think, an assembly or where Christians are gathered together because they're doing it to one another. And that word one another just can mean two, but it generally means a group. How do you do that? Well, you have what we call congregational singing, or something like that. Now, Christianity wouldn't be the first religion where people got together and sang songs to their God. The Greeks did that all the time. And the pagans did that. So it wouldn't be something very unique per se. Except they were singing, well, people get together in bars and sing songs. Star Spangled Banner's an English drinking song. Okay? My heart just gets so filled with joy when I hear the song, Miami Dolphins, Miami Dolphins, and the whole stadium is singing this song. It means they just scored a touchdown, and we're all singing the song together from the 1960s. And the stadium's ringing, huh?
Is that one of those one-hit wonders?
It is a one-hit wonder, yes. Yes, it is. And so, it just fills your heart with joy to sing this. Anyway.
Mike, isn't the song the piano man singing about that singing in the bar?
Yeah, the song Piano Man is about a guy that sings in bars, right? Yes, he's singing it together in bars. But humans sing together a lot. We're listening to music in our ears, but we're listening to people singing together usually, when we do this, usually. All right, so here's the 1 Corinthians 14. What's the conclusion then? I will pray with the Spirit. I will pray also with the understanding. I will sing or solo with the Spirit. I will make melody or sing with the Spirit. And I will sing also solo with understanding. So singing involves understanding and, in this case, spirit or the heart. Okay? So, and when you look at the context of that verse, it is in the context of in the worship service. You may say, well, it was one person in the worship doing this, in that case, who had a spiritual gift. Yes, I might agree with that. But it is in the worship service. It's not speaking specifically about individual singing in this case. But here's one person doing it, which brings up a whole other topic. So here are the words. 3 basic words in the New Testament as far as I can put together. And you may know more. I just don't know anymore. I've looked this up. There may be more, but I don't know anymore. Auto, humneo, and solo. Okay, those are the 3 Greek words. I know that really interests you, except that auto is to sing. We saw that, Colossians 3:16, Ephesians 5:19. Humneo is to sing a hymn. You get that in Matthew 26:30. After the Last Supper, they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. That's humneo. And Acts 16:25, I think this is Paul and Barnabas were singing in the prison. Humneo. A hymn apparently is a song of praise. It is an exclusive category, but it's a song of praise is what a hymn is. And then if you sing a hymn, that's humneo. One's a noun, humnos, one's a verb, humneo. They are singing a hymns. And then you have this word solo, which is to pluck, to cause, to vibrate, to make melody, or to sing. And you have quite a few of these. James 5:13. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Okay, that's solo. Yes, ma'am.
Can you explain make melody? What does that mean? What does melody mean?
Well, in this case, we recognize singing. Even children recognize the difference between singing and speaking. It is making rhythmic noises. Now, talking is rhythmic, but not in the same way as singing. Singing is more of a metered rhythm that's recognizable and compact. And so it is singing, even if it's a chant and you're doing the same thing over and over again. It's rhythmic vocalizations. And it's funny how people's voices just sound different once they begin to sing. They have one voice to speak, and when they sing, even when they sing naturally, it sounds different because it's a different place in the brain producing this. Singing comes from a different place in the brain than talking. That's why children do well when they are sung to. It stimulates different parts of the brain. That's why we like to plug into music and listen to it, because it stimulates the different parts of the brain in a different way than just talking. Now, I tend to listen to podcasts, talking, all the time. I always listen to talk radio or sports radio, and that's a different part of my brain than singing. Yes, sir?
Would melody be the same as saying making music?
Yes, making music. And that's another broad way to say it, making music. So music, we know, is different than making words. I can make words all day. I can't make music very well. There's a difference. And so some people take the words and put them to music. That's a whole different talent there, right? And we know the differences between the two. Now, God created all of this. This is all God's design. In fact, that's the interesting thing about when you go to the book of Revelation, you see these images of heaven, supposedly. You will see music. You'll see singing there, because it's all part of praise. Yeah, did I see a hand back? Matt, did I see your hand?
Yeah.
Somebody back here. Yeah, Gary.
Is that related with the kinds of rhythm we see in poetry as well?
Poetry is closer to music than prose. We would call it prose, where you're just writing sentences. Poetry is closer, yes.
There is rhythm.
There's rhythm. And what we would do is have, you know, the ups and the downs of that. And some poetry just immediately looks like music. Yes, sir.
When you say it comes from different parts of your brain, I don't know that I got his name right because I've had a lot of trouble remembering names now, but there was a country singer, I want to say Mel Tell.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you conducted an interview with Mel, a 5-minute interview would last a half an hour.
Because he stammered so much, right?
Stammered and
Stuttered.
stuttered terribly. But if he sang, he didn't know.
He's from Pahokee. And there was a little place as we make a turn in Pahokee right over here. It was Mel Tillis's place. One of his relatives owned it when I was here. But yes. Oh, I got a great joke. But I'm going to show self-control and not tell my Mel Tillis joke right now. But if you want to hear a great Mel Tillis joke, ask me later. Yes, sir.
A melody is a series of musical notes that are arranged in a specific order to create a pleasing effect.
Create a pleasing effect. So yes, you arrange them, and there's almost an infinite number of ways to arrange things, and it creates an effect. And to create a pleasing effect refers to how the brain here perceives it. You know? And so this is making music or making melody. And it's done by vibration. There's a whole, you've heard me talk about this before. Y'all come in, we'll be done here in a minute. I've done the whole universe is vibrating, is singing. This is what the song to joy, it's in our book. Or the spacious firmament on high, it's also in our book, are about that idea that all of the heavens are vibrating and in motion in a musical way. If you could hear it, you would hear these seats, the color of these seats, making a certain sound. If your ears could perceive that vibration, the walls would be making a different frequency of sound. The ceiling, everybody's clothes would all be making different frequencies of sound if you could hear the vibrations of those atoms. Because red atoms, color red, those atoms are vibrating at a different frequency than the white and the blue. You would hear all this if you had ears to hear it. Well, I think the angels and God have ears to hear this whole universe and all the colors and everything all making sound because of vibrations. We make vibrations right here in our throat using air and the vocal cords that communicate even the words of God, or that communicate curse words, or that communicate praise. Yes.
When it says singing and making a melody in your hearts, that melody is not musical instruments.
Yeah, that's where we're going to get to. So you say, well, this plucking, isn't the plucking on musical instruments? Well, it can be, possibly. We do pluck them, we do vibrate them. See, I love that. People will say, well, we can use music in church because it says you can pluck or vibrate. Okay, I want you to get rid of all those instruments you don't pluck then. You think they're going to get rid of all those instruments they don't pluck? No, they just made an argument they don't even believe in when they say that kind of thing. And it also would require us always to do that. If we're to sing and make melody, how can I leave out the singing? How can I leave out the making melody? And if you ask the same person, do you believe we can all just use our voices to sing? Do we have to use the instruments? They say, oh no, we can sing a cappella. Well, how can you? If that word in this verse here, singing and making melody, if those are linked together by the word and, you can't leave one of them out. Which one are you going to leave out? If what they're saying is true, that the making melody is plucking on an instrument and the singing is what you do with your voice. If those are two separate things he's talking about.
You can't pluck on an instrument in your heart.
Yeah, and that's right, with the heart. Yeah, yes, sir.
Is it literally plucking or is it simply vibrating? Is that what
Well, the words change. I mean, the original idea apparently, and there's dispute about this, Gary. You can go read Everett R. Ferguson's whole book on this subject about music, but he would say that probably originally way back the Greek word solo or some forms of it meant to pluck. And he gave illustrations, like I said, of plucking a beard. I can't sing with some of the other ones. They were all ordinary type things like that. A plumb line. When you strike a plumb line, when you pull the line tight with a powder on it and you strike it, that was solo. But it didn't. He says it didn't mean that at all at the time of the New Testament. Didn't mean that at all. It meant singing.
The reason I say that is virtually all instruments, woodwinds, brass, the percussions, all use vibration.
Yeah, they would all vibrate, because guess what? You can't make a sound without vibration. You can't make any sound without vibration of some sort. So yes, they would create sound. Does it all mean to strum it or pluck it? It's a problem, and I don't think it's a big problem, because I don't think that's what the word means anymore when it's the time of the New Testament.
It's interesting they use pianos, but a piano is not a plucked instrument. Piano is a percussion instrument.
Yeah, it's a percussion. You strike a string and it makes a noise, right? Piano fortissime. That's the official name of the instrument, piano fortissime. Piano means soft and fortissime means loud, and it was the first instrument of its kind that you could strike softly or loudly. You could make the loud and soft sounds at the same time. And anyway, okay, so I know you need to know that. Well, it's shortened to piano, huh?
There's a recording by Ferranti and Teicher, and they basically lift the cover on the piano and they strike the strings with their hands, and it makes an entirely different sound.
Different sound than being struck with that padded thing? Right. All right. And I don't know why that's there. I guess we'll go here. I didn't really mean to go here. Our time is about gone. Many scholars maintain that solo merely meant to sing in the New Testament times. The playing or plucking is done on something other than a mechanical instrument. The early church did not understand these words to include instrumental. The interesting part is when you go back to church history, if the word solo meant instrumental music, those Greek-speaking people at that time did not understand that. Because the early churches, for hundreds of years, did not use instrumental music. And they spoke Greek. So if the Greek word meant to play, they just... Guess what? You got a Greek Orthodox church, right? Until the last 100 or so years, they didn't use instrumental music. Why? Because early churches didn't, and they're Greek. So I think they know what the Greek language meant. But anyway, the Greek, is that the first or second bell, Joel? I guess I'm going to find out. There is no standard English translation of the Bible which includes that these words include instrumental accompaniment. There just isn't any translation that does that, because scholars know that the word does not mean mechanical instrumental accompaniment. The principal modern translation of the Bible do not indicate that these words include instrumental accompaniment. All right, we got to stop. We'll get back to this next week, and I appreciate your attention.